All right, so today we're going to talk about a verdict that was handed down in a police shooting of a black man. I'm filming this on a Tuesday, and last Friday, September 15th, was when former officer now, Jason Stockley of the St. Louis Police Department, was acquitted for the 2011 shooting death of Anthony Lamar Smith. Right? There were substantial protests over the weekend, and there was some violence, and I want to provide a centrist view. Right? It's not necessarily my view, but I want to provide a centrist view. I want to put it out there. This is what I think is reasonable, and it's a lot like my view anyway. In any case, right? And in the first place, I want to say I can accept some distinction between the violence and the peaceful protesters, right? There's some distinction to be made there. We can discuss that another time, but it's not exactly fair to just equate them, right? There were both. Now, police shootings, right? In general, I am inclined to side with the police officer, right? That's how I approach it in the first place, and then I learn about the details and I make my decision, right? And I can be swayed, right? Walter Scott is an obvious one where the police officer was wrong there, and he's going through the process. What's the other guy's name? I can remember the first name. Yeah, I thought that's what it was. Laquan McDonald, that guy too. And this one here, the shooting of Anthony Lamar Smith. This one is a very sad situation, right? It's not so clear, right? Like, I can go ahead and admit that I have doubts that the police officer was right to do this. And the main issue is that the gun that the cop Stockley said Smith had, the gun had Stockley's DNA, but it didn't have Smith's DNA. It had the cop's DNA, but it didn't have the black guy's DNA, right? So, that's a pretty high hurdle to climb, right? And so what happened was Stockley, he waived his right to a jury trial, and so this was decided by a judge, right? It wasn't decided by a jury. And the judge had some idea of the controversy that his decision was going to set off. And he explained himself, and he says that, the prosecution said that Officer Stockley planted the gun on Anthony Lamar Smith. And what the judge said is that if that was the case, then the gun should have been seen on the multiple videos of Stockley walking from whatever it was, the police cruiser, to Smith's car after he'd shot him, right? Because Stockley shot Smith, went back to the car, and then came back again. And so it supposedly is when Stockley went back to the car that he got the gun to plant on Smith, right? And so what the judge says is that the gun was big enough that it should have been visible in the videos. And so he has to conclude that Smith had the gun in the first place, right? So this is a very sad situation. That seems like a reasonable explanation, but it's just, you still have doubts in your mind. But I think, one thing that people don't understand is the importance in criminal trials of having the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, right? I read that the family of Anthony Lamar Smith was already awarded $900,000 in a wrongful death lawsuit. So all that's happened is that the police officer Stockley has been acquitted in the criminal trial. It's not as though there hasn't been any compensation for the family. And we want to have a very high bar in criminal trials because we don't want for innocent people to be convicted. And so that means that sometimes guilty people will go off free. And that's a sad thing. And I'm not saying that's what's happened here, but, you know, it sounds like it's possible that that's what's happened here, that the cop's DNA was on the gun and the perp's wasn't. But the judge has an explanation, right? So what I'm saying is that I don't put my foot down one way or another on this. Sometimes I'm more stubborn. This one is more perplexing to me, right? This particular case. And one thing that's especially perplexing to me is that the prosecutors wanted to pursue lesser charges, and the judge didn't let them. And I haven't read widely about this, but I've read about it from some news sources. And what the judge said, you can look it up and you'll find the same thing. What the judge said to deny that, you know, the way it's framed anyway, it's really perplexing. Right? This is one of my pet peeves. I wish that in situations like this, in cop shootings, that prosecutors would go for lesser charges so that there would be a chance of conviction, so that, you know, all these social justice warriors could be satisfied that they achieved justice. Right? So anyway, this is what I would like the centrist reaction to be, right? You know, all the protesters in the streets, I would like someone to have a reaction like this, where they begin by saying, okay, all right, Anthony Lamar Smith, he was into sketchy shit, right? He was a sketchy guy into sketchy shit, right? He was a thug, okay? That's what we're dealing with here, but it's like Tupac says. You know, we have to consider that. I didn't choose the thug life chose me, right? So just saying that Anthony Lamar Smith was a thug, you know, all that means is that he was a thug. It doesn't mean that he didn't make the best choices of what was presented to him, right? Maybe the thug life chose him. Now, that being said, just because the thug life chooses people, that doesn't mean that we should just turn over society to be run by thugs, right? Or allow thugs to have free reign, right? These are the complicated moral questions. People don't want to face these, but just because the thug life chooses people doesn't mean that we shouldn't bust thugs. Okay? So this is how you have to begin if you're going to be reasonable or centrist about this, is Anthony Lamar Smith was a thug. He was into sketchy shit. He shouldn't have been a heroin dealer. And supposedly he tried to run over the cops. If he tried to run over the cops, he shouldn't have done that. Okay? He shouldn't have led the cops on a high-speed chase. Right? And then here is where you can satisfy, you know, your emotions, your bleeding heart here, like I've referenced earlier. But the cop's DNA was on the gun, and Anthony Lamar Smith's DNA was not on the gun, right? So, okay, granted, you know, Smith shouldn't have gotten him into that situation. He shouldn't have gotten himself into that situation. And, you know, he's a thug, etc., etc. But this wasn't the right time for him to die, right? You know, he's lucky he lived to be 24 years old, right? Heroin dealer in St. Louis. Like the judge said, it would be remarkable if he didn't have a gun on him, right? It would be quite strange. So he's 24, right? But that being said, in this situation, right, the cop's DNA was on the gun and not his. So what I'm saying is that this is the only way that this situation can be approached in a way where there can be a coming together in society, where there can be unity, right? You know, if you were to go to the protests, you won't hear anyone that is upset about this verdict, upset about this cop killing of this black man, note all these things about Smith, right? You would be, if you just took their word for it, you would be completely oblivious to the fact that he was a thug, right? And, you know, we have all this talk about, oh, you got to see it from his perspective. You got to see it from his perspective. And I'm totally down. Like I said, maybe the thug life chose him, but you got to see it from the cop's perspective, right? The cop's pulling over. He's coming up to a heroin deal. He says the guy tried to run him over. There was a high-speed chase. He approaches the car. That's a pretty scary situation, right? Like, I'm not a cop because I'm not fit for those situations. This is what coming to the middle is about. All right, we got to see it from all these points of view, and it's tough because it's not resolved. I'm not resolved on it. A lot of times I am, but I wanted to make this video because this is a tricky situation, right? Am I satisfied with the judge's explanation that the gun should have shown up in the different videos? You know, I'm inclined to be satisfied, but I wouldn't mind being more satisfied, right? And you know, even if it was that the cop planted the gun on May, you won't hear anyone mention all these details about him, right? So, you know, about Smith, that he was sketchy. Anyway, so that's the appropriate centrist take here that approaches this from all sides. Thank you very much. Hashtag Ancient Greek Lives Matter. Thank you.